And I think there is some beautiful stuff that is happening right now of Jews and Muslims and Christians coming together, and Jews themselves saying, "Hey, because of the struggle against anti-Semitism, we are standing along Palestinians, because we are fighting against all of these systems of violence and oppression." So, to be anti-Zionist for them is to be Jewish. It's to be authentically Jewish. And so as long as our struggle is like for justice, for the welfare, for the well-being of people, then we reject anti-Semitism in the same breath as we reject anti-Palestinian bias and bigotry. And we pursue the freedom and the dignity of Jews alongside, not in spite of or instead of, but alongside the liberty and the freedom of Palestinians. I think what concerns me, though, is the weaponization of the scriptures and how that has been used effectively in the last 2 years. I mean, I can tell you from the beginning of the war, where you have Christians quoting Romans 13 to justify the war.
Yeah.
You hear
and Netanyahu quoting about eliminate the Amalekites.
The Amalekites taking us back to 1 Samuel 15 and the genocide against the Amalekites, complicated history between the Amalekites and the Israelites, but a very clear commandment to ethnically cleanse and erase all of the Amalekites. But even Christians themselves, I'm hearing Protestants now are, using just war theory. Suddenly it's a very authentically Protestant tradition. And all these kind of usage of the Old Testament and Romans 13 and what have you. And it's frustrating and upsetting, right? That the Bible again is being wielded as a weapon against people. And even we saw this recently with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, a well-known politician who's like, I'm supposed to support Israel no matter what. The Bible tells me so. Well, does it? Where does it say that? And to whom did God say that? What's your assessment, especially as someone who's studied the Bible and you continue to do this work? This weaponization seems to me a very alarming phenomenon in many Christian circles.
Yeah, it is. The attempt to use scripture to justify all sorts of nefarious ends. There's a long history of doing that.
Right.
I mean, people have always... Right. It's not new. People have been doing it for a long time. So, using Romans 13 saying the Palestinians should obey their governing authorities, the Israeli state or the Netanyahu government. Well, how do you obey a government that basically has made it a point of their campaign to eliminate you? Netanyahu intends to keep this war going for as long as possible because he knows once it ends, his political career ends, and he could find himself in trouble nationally and internationally. So I don't think this conflict is going to end anytime soon. I think he wants to drag it out for as long as possible because his own political career and the longevity of his government depends on stretching out this war. That's not just war theory. That's, keeping war going for the sake of your own self-interest and political opportunism. So it is sad the way. I mean, the discussion between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz was strange for its bizarreness, and Ted Cruz appealing to the Bible, but not knowing which part of the Bible he was appealing to. That was strange, and it just goes to show that it's very much a shallow, vaguely Protestant type of Christianity that Ted Cruz seems to have an affection for. I mean, he's a guy, I don't think he's really looked at the Bible and Israel and the Palestinian question, anything along those lines. Because there's also stuff in the Bible about for Israel to love the alien and the sojourner in their midst. So I didn't see him quoting those verses when it comes to how you treat different people, who live in around the Jews. So it was a bizarre debate, and it was like watching to a guy who's got a strong opinion about things he knew nothing about.
Which is so dangerous.
And it's so dangerous, but it can have bad consequences. Yeah. I once met, when I was in the military, I once met a Israeli officer, and this was like mid-1990s, so, even before 9/11. And he said to me he believed in a Palestinian state. It was called Jordan.
Mm.
And I spoke to him, and he said, yeah, we should just pick up all the Palestinians, just move them to Jordan.
Right.
I mean, they can have Jordan, and we'll have the rest of it. So, I mean, that was disturbing. It was disturbing that a number of people at the table where we were discussing, whether Christian or non-Christian, kind of agreed with him. The idea, yeah, the way to fix this problem is just massive deportation, which I believe is what the Trump regime has proposed. Why don't we just move everyone out of Gaza? Gaza, will send some to Egypt, some to Turkey, some to Syria. We'll just liquidate the place, which is a definition of genocide. Whether you, if you depopulate an entire area, either violently or otherwise, or that is a type of genocide, because you're removing a whole identity group, a whole tribe, a whole nationality, a whole religious group out of an area. And because people don't understand their own scriptures, or they allow the scriptures to be twisted, they're willing to listen and give biblical sanction to things like that.
I mean, Christians have done that throughout history, right? And even moving Jews out of Europe was also a very good idea for many Christians, right? This is a Jewish problem. What do you do with the Jews in Europe? Well, let's kick them out. It's insane to me that this keeps happening. But to use the Bible in such an easy way, and I'm struck by your phrase that he's so confident about something he doesn't know. And he said, I learned this in church, which is also an indictment against our churches. What are we teaching those kids? But you're teaching them something that obviously is a crime against humanity, whether it's genocide or ethnic cleansing. These are crimes against humanity. But it's easy for that person, for that kid in Sunday school, to take that teaching from Sunday school and apply it geopolitically to mean crimes against humanity. I mean, the insanity of how the Bible has been abused, whether in Sunday school or in seminary or in church sermons, it's insane, and it's super, super scary, and it's a very alarming, I think, phenomenon. I think we need to reckon with this fact here. So what is the best way for Christians to think about the Bible and use the Bible when they think about Palestine and Israel? Here's my answer. Maybe quote Jesus. Maybe quote Matthew 5, not Romans 13 and 1 Samuel. But anyway, what's your thought? Like, how do we apply, as an exegete and a Bible scholar, not to spend too much time with hermeneutics, but like, for the average Christian, like, what's the advice you give them to think politically about the scriptures, how to apply it properly to our reality today?
Okay, let me give you what I think about 3 basic rules.
Right.
Number 1, beware of pundits with Bible proof texts. Okay? Beware of pundits with Bible proof texts. Now, whether that's Jon Stewart, or whether that's Tucker Carlson, or whether it's Sean Hannity, beware of pundits with Bible proof texts. Secondly, you've got to consider
that. What do you mean, proof texts?
Okay, so when Ted Cruz quotes Genesis 12, I will bless who bless yous, I will curse who curse yous. Don't assume that they know what they're talking about. Right. They may be ripping verses out of context, or they may not understand the specificity of a particular verse. I mean, you know the thing when people quote Jeremiah 29, 29:11, that, I know the promises I have for you. I don't think that applies to all Christians. I think that was very much about Christians living in Babylon. So
Jews living in Babylon. The
average pundit is not a very well-read Bible scholar or a trained pastor. So beware of pundits with proof texts. Okay. The second thing, you want to know the whole counsel of God. So yes, there was some warfare between the Hebrews and the Canaanites, but that was for a specific time. Once they were settled in the land, they were commanded by the Lord to be compassionate and merciful to the alien and sojourner in their midst. Okay? So, so intertribal warfare was not meant to be the norm Okay, they were meant to show compassion to people living in their midst. Then you've also got to look at the teaching of Jesus. What did he say about loving your neighbors? If you want to know a good example about how to live with religious and ethnic differences, consider the parable of the Good Samaritan. That's probably a much better model of the way you should think of, say, Muslims. And I think you could argue that Muslims are a type of Samaritan category because they're monotheists. They're not Jewish. They're not Christian. They've got a place for Jesus in their religion. So that they're kind of, initially they were perceived as a Christian sect. Early on, they were thought to be like a bizarre Christian sect. So you've got to think of them as a kind of religious group that is kind of similar to Jews and Christians, but it's different in the same way that the Samaritans were a bit different to Jews. So that's a good category of thinking about them. The other thing you've got to do is be very careful when people use the Bible to support any type of violence, okay? Because generally, certainly in the New Testament and the teaching of Jesus, there is a very big reluctance to do things like seeking revenge. There is just so many injunctions against the Bible about seeking vengeance. It says, leave revenge to God. Now, that doesn't mean that nations cannot defend themselves and, conduct just war or whatever, or conflicts of self-defense, such as is happening in Ukraine. But, be careful where people use the Bible to sanction violence or say things like, with God on our side. When someone says, with God on our side, usually nothing good is coming after that. It usually means with God on our side, we are going to smite our enemies, whether that's the Jews, the Muslims, the natives, the Indians, the immigrants. Nothing good comes after that. So that's some of the basic things you can do. And overall, having a good understanding of biblical theology, that God's promises to Israel were fulfilled in Christ, not in the concrete promise of land. And there's two Bible verses I teach my students, Daniel, and that's Paul's speech in Pisidian Antioch in Acts 13, where he says, what God promised our ancestors, he has fulfilled for us, their children, by raising Jesus from the dead. Okay? And then also Paul in 2 Corinthians, where he says, as many as there are of the promises of God, they all find their yes in Jesus Christ. So you've got to think about promise and fulfillment as Christologically centered. God's promises for Israel are fulfilled, not in the establishment of Israel in 1948, but they're established in 30 AD in the coming of the Messiah to Israel and for Israel. That is where that has got to be the locus of God's promises. That's where we see God's faithfulness to Jews and to the world in the coming of the Jewish Messiah, not in the establishment of a secular state some 2,000 years later, which has very different boundaries to ancient Israel, has a secular government and all sorts of things.
Did you like this video? Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support the work we're doing here at the podcast, go over to patreon.com/acrossthedivide. Your support keeps us going. Thank you, friends.